Hi, it's Manic44 here, and today I invite you to the review of the ELAK74N replica by E&L. Thanks Gunfire for providing the replica to the review. Link in the video description. E&L is a brand that has accustomed us to the replicas from the AK family made to the highest standards. Thanks to use of steel in the construction of the entire replica, they created a platform that with its durability I believe exceeds the vast majority of replicas currently available on the market. This is certainly due to the fact that the manufacturer boasts that the replicas are produced on the same line as real firearms. The ELAK74N is a replica of the AK-74N rifle and it's modeled from the new Essential series, which is to be a cheaper proposition from E&L compared to the current models. Contrary to appearance, this is not a next generation. And yes, there are visible changes compared to the previous series, thanks to which they managed to drop the price. But how drastic these changes are, we will see in today's review, because as always, we will see how the replica is built from outside and inside, we will see what functions it has and of course its performance. But as usual, let's start with a little unboxing. A black and red cardboard box with a transport handle greets us with the slogan "Legendary Perfection". Underneath we will find a quality control card with the results on chrono in the factory, user manual with instructions for disassembling the replica, a mid-cap magazine holding about 150 BBs, an empty oiler, the replica is made of steel so it may be useful, spare 30 amp fuse, a gun cleaning kit, more on that later, and of course the ELAK74 replica. Let's take a closer look at it. Measuring 95 cm, the replica is not small. With a magazine but without a battery, the replica weighs about 3.8 kg. Too much to hold with one hand. Its weight comes from the fact that the manufacturer used practically only steel during its construction. Instead of naming the steel parts, I will tell you what is not made of it. And this is of course wooden handguard, stock and polymer pistol grip. Everything else, starting from the barrel and ending with small pins, is made of steel, what can be seen from the magnets attached to the replica. And of course the replica is as straight as an arrow. The elements themselves are oxidized and very often discolorated from the oil in which the steel is preserved. On the very front of the replica you will find a flash hider, which of course can be unscrewed. Just press the latch and you can unscrew the flash hider. Under it there is a 24mm clockwise thread. After removing the flash hider we have easier access to the built-in ramrod as in the real firearm, but due to its length and the fact that it's made of steel, I do not recommend putting it into the barrel. Wooden elements instead of plywood are made of solid wood, which I guess is supposed to be part of the cost slicing. The wood itself has a very nice color and it's quite soft, so after one game and making this review, damage is already visible on it, which in my opinion only adds to the charm of the replica. The replica has a vertically adjustable front sight and rear sight. As I mentioned, the grip is made of plum-colored polymer. The replica does not lack points for mounting the sling, which are located on the left side of the replica in the form of an eyelet on the front and a movable hook on the stock. And speaking of the stock, it's worth mentioning that just like in the real steel counterpart, there is a dedicated place for the cleaning kit, which you just need to put inside so deeply until you feel that the flap has fallen and crushed your finger. Pulling out the kit is just as easy, just insert your finger so deeply that the kit will crush it between it and the flap. Pull your finger out and the kit will pop out by itself thanks to the spring in the stock. Very simple and convenient. The hop-up chamber slider can be found after pulling the steel bolt back. To increase the hop-up strength, move the slider back. And to reduce it, move it forward. The bolt has no lock, so when adjusting hop-up, you have to keep it in the rear position. If the slider is too loose or too stiff, you can adjust it with a screw on the other side of the chamber. The place for the battery is under the dust cover. To remove it, press the button and pull the cover up. The wiring of the replica ends with a Tamiya plug. Here you will also find a 30 amp fuse. Because the space under the dust cover is limited, I decided to use a dedicated 11.1 volt 1200 mAh electro river battery. which even with the adapter fits here without any problems. A little perforation and the cover is in its place. The selector in the replica offers 3 setting modes: safe, continuous fire, and single fire. The selector itself works with visible resistance and the setting points are very clear. There is no slack here. The trigger itself is quite distinct and breaks at the end. Due to the fact that the replica is in the N version, there is also a slight mount for the so-called dovetail, thanks to which, apart from dedicated sights for the AK series, we can for example mount the upper wrist rail for a sight of our choice. Inside the magwell there is an insert that makes it easier to attach magazines, so even someone who normally runs with AR series replicas like me should not have any major problems. The 150mm mid-cap magazine itself is made of polymer and it sits very well in the replica. In the Sima magazines I had to file the front latch a bit and they fit much looser, but they work as they should. All replica outer parts are fitted perfectly and the only elements that show any movement are the dust cover, that moves only under pressure, the bolt, lower handguard, and the flash hider, which is the only element that feels that it has large slack, but which is an easy fix with a bit of Teflon tape. The Gearbox shell has a quick spring change system that can be accessed without disassembling the entire replica, and will only need a multi-tool. You may know this method from Quick Fix series on the Gunfire YouTube channel, but I will also show you how to do it. First I check if the nozzle is in the rear position. Then I unscrew the screw holding the selector and disassemble it. Now I take off the dust cover. I pull out the bolt guide with the spring and the bolt itself. Now I can unscrew the screw holding the pistol grip and take the grip itself off. I can now tilt the rear of the gearbox up enough to get to the guide. I press the guide and turn it 45 degrees, so I can pull it out with the spring. Before we look inside the replica, it's worth taking a look at the cleaning kit that comes with the set. Brush as well as the jack will not be useful to us because their diameter was made for the real steel counterpart. But the key itself is more useful, thanks to which we can adjust the front sight or unscrew the screw on the hand grip. Even the kit tip itself can be useful for easier release of the gas pipe switch. Overall, not very useful gadget, but still very nice to have it. We saw what the replica looks like from the outside and what functions it has. Let's see how it's taken apart. I'll start with removing the dust cover. As it showed before, just press this button and pull the cover up. It helps to move it sideways. Now I push the button forward and lift it up so I can pull it out with the slide guide and spring. And here's a word of advice: if the bolt guide has a lot of play, you can compensate for it by tightening this screw with a 2mm Allen key. After switching the selector from the safe position, the bolt itself can be moved to the very end so I can pull it out. Then I remove the screw that connects the hop-up chamber with the gearbox shell. Using a 2.5mm Allen key, I remove the screws at the top of the hop-up chamber. You can unscrew them as shown on the material, then the nuts will fall off the bottom itself, or first unscrew the nuts with a flat screwdriver. After unscrewing the screws, the insert in the magazine well should fall out by itself. The next step is to partially unscrew 2 screws under the rear side using 2mm Allen key. It's quite tight there, so it will take me a few minutes. After removing them, I can separate the front with the body and pull the barrel with the chamber. It will not be an easy task because the parts are fitted very well, and I must admit that off the camera I had to help myself with a board and a hammer to loosen these elements. In order for the front to get loose, the previous shown screws had to be unscrewed to this level. Let's take a look at the barrel assembly with the chamber. The replica has a 455mm long brass barrel of unknown diameter. The barrel has a strange discoloration in one part that looks rougher from the inside than the rest of the barrel. The hop-up chamber itself is made of metal and the slider and the clip are made of polymer. The blue hop-up backing has a classic contact element. It is very soft. It's quite nice for making a flat hop. The backing was dirty but only from the outside. The mounted knob is very soft. Time for the body with the gearbox. I start by unscrewing the selector screw with pliers. Now I can pull out the selector with its elements. Then I unscrew the pistol grip screw. Here I also have access to the motor adjustment screw using a 2mm Allen key. I slide the pistol grip off the motor and I can carefully pull out the gearbox so that the selector gears do not fall out. It's worth remembering how they were set. The gearbox contains the most examples of what the manufacturer saved on. I pull out the guide with the spring, push it in and turn it 45 degrees. The guide is mainly made of polymer, only its back is made of metal and it has a polymer washer, which I bet is supposed to be some kind of spring bushing. The spring itself is quite short and has an irregularly pitched coil. Then I remove the selector gears, I detach the motor wires and unscrew the basket. The motor itself is a standard ELM 120 instead of a high-torque ELM 170 used in other replicas. The shell has a visible slight rounding of the cylinder corners, which has a positive effect on the shell's durability. After uninstalling the selector gears, after removing the cover behind the trigger, top bar, and unscrewing the Phillips screws, I can look inside the shell. Inside I first noticed the presence of small amount of grease on the shell where it should be. The gears themselves are very standard set with a gear ratio of 18:1. They are made in the metal sintered technology instead of CNC as in the case of gears for more expensive models. The sector gear has a polymer delayer. The gears are mounted on 9mm bushings, the fit of which in the frame is perfect. In the more expensive models you will find ball bearings. I will describe shimming of the gears as good. The motor gear has a minimum clearance that it should be, the middle gear is almost too tight, and the piston gear has the greatest clearance. Nevertheless, the whole set turns without much resistance. It is time for pneumatics. Here we will see further cost cuts. The polymer piston has one metal tooth instead of three, and a non-bearing polymer piston head instead of a dampened one. The polymer cylinder head has one O-ring, a metal nozzle and a fairly large and hard bumper, and it fits with the shell is very poor. The Zero type cylinder is metal and has well-finished edges. In more expensive models we find a cylinder with integrated head. A polymer nozzle with a length of about 20.65 mm has one O-ring and has a minimum play in the extended position. The tappet plate is made of polymer and has a rather soft spring. The parts do not look impressive, but they make up with the level of seal, because the system has no problem passing the syringe test, with the nozzle inserted and fully extended. We know what the replica looks like from the outside and inside. Let's see its performance. The replica is tested on 0.28 gram BBs from Special Arms Edge and 11.1 volt 1200 mAh electro reverb battery. With a hop-up set, the replica generates about 1.23 joules and its rate of fire exceeds 19 BBs per second. Shooting tests are also performed on 0.28 gram BBs from Special Arms Edge and 11.1 volt 1200 mAh battery. That day I had a slight crosswind. I start the test from 30 meters. At this distance, of course, there is no problem hitting a target of a size of a crouching person, both semi and auto. It is similar from 40 meters, but here you can clearly see that the gripping is getting worse. At 50 meters, it's already clear that the BB rises a bit in the final phase of the flight and the gripping has deteriorated further. A hit from a distance of 60 meters is possible, but it will require us to shoot a bit higher. I will describe an effective range around 50 meters and maximum range of 60 meters. The replica was with me on one game, where I most often use it at distance of about 30 to 40 meters, where it performed very well. Video from that game next weekend. E&L got us used to the high quality of the replicas, and despite the fact that the ELAK74N belongs to the cheaper Essential series, the most important elements have remained the same. All metal elements are still made of steel and their fit is very good, so we can be sure that the replica will still be solid after a long use. The replica looks very good, and apart from the loose flash hider, I have nothing to complain about. The gearbox works fine, and the pneumatic disc, despite the play in the cylinder head, keeps the seal very well. The metal chamber with the soft backing spins BBs nicely, and the grouping is good despite the strange barrel. However, you can see with the naked eye which parts were changed to make the price lower. Instead of plywood, the wooden elements are made of solid wood. Instead of a high-torque ELMS 170 motor, we have a standard ELM 120 motor, which still gives us about 90 BBs per second. The steel CNC gears were changed to an ordinary sintered ones that rotate on bushings instead of bar bearings, and the one-piece cylinder was replaced with a more standard solution. Nevertheless, the replica generates quite stable results on the chronograph, and its effective range I will define at about 50 meters, which easily makes it playable straight off the box.
It is no secret that I am not a huge fan of the AK platform personally. The AKs are heavy, bulky and non-ergonomic, but I will be lying if I said that I do not like this replica. Its exterior is very well made and it's a pleasure to hold it in your hands. And apart from the previously mentioned flash hider, I have nothing to complain about it in this regard. Honestly, I thought it will be a worst case inside, and yes, you can see what parts have been changed to slash the price, but the parts used fulfill their function and you can have fun with this replica in stock. But I have to say that I already have a plan to prepare it for Forest Games. For who was the Essential series created for? In my opinion, replicas from this series will be perfect for people who are looking for a very good base for your upgrades. You can play with it in stock, and if you plan to replace its internal parts anyway, there is no point in buying more expensive replica just to replace half of them. It's better to invest in cheaper one and make the planned upgrades for the difference in the price. Although, as always, I recommend playing with this replica in stock because, in my opinion, it's fine. And do not forget that with my discount code for Gunfire you can drop its price even lower. That will be all for today. Let me know in the comments what do you think about the ELAK74N and the entire Essential series. And for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.